Hello and welcome to Neuroshambles, the podcast that aims to shine a light into some of the murkier corners of what it's like to parent neurodivergent kids. I'm Mark Allen, and every episode I'm going to be swapping stories with my guests about some of the frankly ludicrous nonsense we have to deal with on a daily basis. So, if you're anything like me and you're feeling frazzled, overwhelmed and pretty much an outcast from polite society, join me. Hello and welcome to episode 20 of Neuroshambles. Once again, thank you for joining me, Neuroshamblers, on what is the final episode of this current season of Neuroshambles before I take a bit of a summer break. Fear not, though, I'm not just going to be phoning in for this episode. It's another cracker I've got lined up for you where I'm going to be meeting a new guest, discussing a new topic of the week. We'll also have some neurodiversity champions, some tiny epic wins, and, of course, some what the flip moments. So, I'm going to stop dithering, and we can start blathering.
Meet the guest.
So, our guest this week is a parent of 2 kids and also an accredited ADHD coach, as well as hosting her own podcast called All Aboard ADHD about parenting ADHD kids. So, we're going to discuss that in a bit more detail later on in the show. But for now, I am delighted to welcome aboard Claire Quigley Ward. How are you doing?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm very well, thank you.
Good. So obviously when we meet a guest, it's very important for us to know a little bit more about your setup and what neurodivergencies you have at play in your household. So take us through that, Claire.
Absolutely. So my 13-year-old son has ADHD. He was diagnosed at 6.5, so quite young.
Okay.
And therefore we've been on this journey for about 6.5 years now. I often say that when I first went to the GP, I wasn't seeking a diagnosis. I actually thought it was me. I thought I was just being a really, really rubbish parent. And I had a toddler at the time. There's like 4.5 years between my son and my daughter.
Okay.
And, you know, when you just start to see that kind of gap starting to widen, and just feeling really out of my depth, like whatever I did, it wasn't working.
Yeah.
And so it was very much about me being the issue, for want of a better word, or struggling.
Were you asking the GP to give you something? just
Well, I
some.
just felt like I genuinely did. I thought I need some help here. I need some advice. Like, what am I doing wrong? And he suggested the referral.
Okay.
And then that took us to see the consultant, the child psychiatrist. And then at the end of the first appointment, I had my son in tow with me because, you know, in those days you did things face to face pre-COVID. And he was obviously bouncing off the walls in the room. And by the end of it, he said, I think I could give you a diagnosis, but obviously we have to go through the protocols. And I was really taken aback. I was like, a diagnosis, sorry. It was not even on my radar at all.
Okay.
So it was quite a shock. But obviously now it's the best thing that ever happened, and I'm so grateful to myself in a weird way for taking him, because it's changed the absolute course of positively. I think having that information at such a young age,
undoubtedly, I think, just adds a bit of context to what's going on. And I remember taking Otto for his diagnosis, and similarly he went berserk, and I was like, normally in those situations I'll be sort of reining him in a bit, but I was like, no, you crack on.
Yeah, you need to see this.
This is what I have to deal with every day, mate.
Although the irony is, because I thought it was my parenting, there was a degree in which I was trying my hardest in that setting to demonstrate good parenting. But, you know, it is what it is. And I'm really glad that it happened.
Okay,
really, really glad.
So that's your son. How old's your son now?
Yes, he's 13, so just coming to the end of year 8.
Okay.
And I also have an 8-year-old daughter, but who doesn't have a diagnosis, but I am 99.9% certain that she has ADHD. So that's something we're starting the process of exploring for her now. Yep. She's a completely different kettle of fish, as you would expect, because she's a girl.
Yeah.
And she masks a huge amount. In fact, I think she's quite clever, because what I've started to notice in the last year is that she's managed to benefit from other people's interventions in the classroom by acting as their support. So there's a boy who's got ADHD, and in English he's allowed to doodle while they're working, and she works with him as a learning partner, and as a result she gets to doodle, so she's quite clever, she's very shrewd, but obviously we're exploring that for her now. And in the midst of all of that, there's me. So I had an adult diagnosis about 3 years ago now.
Okay.
Following really the journey that I've been on with my son, learning, my way of coping was to really learn about ADHD, and I just threw myself into that. And as a result of everything I learned, and I'm still learning, you start to piece together a picture, don't you? And
Yeah.
it's not then just about in the context of my kids. I suddenly discover more about myself every day. So yeah, it is genuinely, I know some people don't like the word journey, but I really use it a lot with All Aboard ADHD, because I think that's exactly what it is. Wherever you are on it, it's a continuous one.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for introducing us to your neuroshambolic family. There's lots to go over in this particular topic of the week, so let's crack on with it.
What's the topic of the week?
So as with many of the topics that we cover on Neuroshambles, I like to take a look at something that is relatively trouble-free for neurotypical families, and I contrast that with the very different experiences that parents of neurodivergent kids have. So one of the areas that this is the most obvious to me, I think, is the simple act of trying to get a decent photo of our neurodifferent kids. Right? Because I don't know if you've seen the cover of Neuroshambles. That is the sort of typical view of how I see my life. It's me sort of in the middle, relatively still, while everything else is going berserk around me.
You.
Yes. And that's generally how my life pans out. And now, to many parents of neurodivergence, the prospect of getting a decent image of their kids is as likely as getting a decent image of the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot. It's unlikely. And there are so many reasons why it's much more difficult for neurodivergent kids to be captured on camera. And I think probably chief amongst these are the particular challenges posed by kids that have ADHD. And I thought, of all of the subjects that I could talk to you about, Claire, it would be this one.
Absolutely. Do you know what? And when you suggested this topic, I was genuinely so excited, because it just felt like a subject I could talk so authentically about.
Yes.
And it's quite nice to be able to do so in the context of people who kind of get it, because I love photos. That's the irony.
Yeah.
I absolutely love them. I always have since, I was a teenager in the 90s with your point and shoot. And they really matter to me, photos. I love them. I treasure them. I've got frames up in my living room that I regularly rotate.
Wow. You print them out and stuff?
I do.
Wow.
I go
Nice.
old school. And so I change the photos up all the time. I make photo books. So that adds a different degree of challenge, because when you really want to capture it for all these amazing reasons, and then let the fun begin.
You're really raising the stakes by caring a lot about the photos.
I know. I'm making a rod for my own back, for sure.
Yeah, and this is the challenge, and I never thought it would be a thing. Like, just even getting my kids on board with having a photo taken is a massive nightmare, because obviously not all of my kids are that way inclined. I see other kids, who, like, the camera comes out and they're all posing and they get together and they look at the camera and they do all that, right? Yeah, but they don't need encouragement. Whereas mine, it is, I'm trying to just lure them in to get them near enough to take a photo. It's like a wildlife photography, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I'm sure that's probably easier. Sometimes I say, why is this so hard, guys? It's just a photo. If we just did it quickly, it would be done. It's like, this is making it harder.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The reason that they don't want to get involved is not because they're concerned with how they look. My kids, if you've listened to Neuroshambles before, not overly bothered about what they're wearing or how they look or how they're going to be perceived. Jay is the one that is most reluctant to have his photo taken, and that is purely because he's incredibly driven by his own agenda. So his autism, his PDA profile means that he sees no need for it, right? Because if you think about it, this photo is not for him. He knows what he looks like. He's got a mirror in his room. So it's not like he needs to have a memento of his face. He can do that anytime he wants. So the idea of it being for someone else is just like, he's not on board with that. Who cares? Yeah. And I used to spend ages just having this, just trying to get him in, trying to encourage him to take part. And obviously he'd either outright refuse, and you try bartering with him, or eventually he might begrudgingly agree just so we stop banging on about it. That is very often the reason for it. But by the time the photo is actually taken, at that point, that negotiation, that cajoling, the mood is already soured. So the photo that you get off the back of it is not worth it, is it? Because people are pissed off. Everyone's pissed off. Tam and I are stressed. Jay is angry. Otto is bored. And India is just frustrated by everyone dicking about. So very rarely do we have a family photo of all of us where we all look happy. It doesn't happen. At least one of us is pissed off, if not all of us.
Yes, that's very familiar. I'm laughing because I'm immediately playing back these moments in my mind, so I can relate entirely to that situation. And it's funny actually because you said about your son with the PDA stuff. I think my daughter, who actually as of yet doesn't have a diagnosis, but there's definitely some demand avoidance in there for her, which I don't get so much with my son because she's the younger one, she's 8, but even as a toddler, when she only had a few words, she used to say no photo like she's some sort of celebrity, you know, like no photo. So yeah, we've gone through various stages or evolutions, I should say, of that, which started with the kind of no photos through to trying to get, say, a big extended family photo. And I've got some amazing ones where everyone's smiling really nicely and she is scowling, like full on, you know, not happy to be in it. That just then adds a whole different dimension to it. Or invariably by the time I might get her to smile, my son has had enough by that point. And
just getting everyone on board at that one point is a nightmare. Another problem, particularly with kids who have a more hyperactive profile, is getting them to stay still for the photo itself. The amount of photos I've got where they're blurred or just sort of they're not actually looking at the camera when everyone else is looking at the camera because they've got distracted by something else or they've moved or twitched or fidgeted. It's a nightmare. Like, thank Christ for the introduction of live photo.
I was just about to say that. Honestly, it's like the greatest invention known to man. I mean,
it must have been designed for neurodivergent
specifically
families, right?
for us. And if it wasn't, then it's just a real gift, because how many times, you're probably like me, do you have to go through the various versions to make your key photo one that is kind of vaguely everybody looking in the right direction or smiling or eyes open or some version of it, just to try to at least salvage one.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, like, for people who might not know what a live photo is, if you don't have an iPhone or if you don't really know about that feature, it's basically that it takes a little bit of time before the photo and a little bit of time afterwards, and then you can kind of scroll through that time frame and get the shot where everyone is actually looking up. In theory, that very rarely happens for me, because pretty much always, every time I get one where my kid is looking at the camera and everyone is looking good, I look like shit. It's always where I'm blinking or gurning.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of photos where it's like, oh, this looks good, doesn't it? And then you zoom in on me and it's like, no, for God's sake.
It's fine. Yeah, I give up.
I think there are other apps, though. I think Android has one where you can take the best image of everyone's face in a group. Have you seen that one?
I saw that on an advert, yes. And I have not seen it in action, but I was like, that is very clever, because I feel like that's the next level that I need for my family photos. So yeah, very, very, very clever.
I think the next evolution is just to get a family sketch artist. Just draws us all looking good.
Go back to portrait painting, because it doesn't matter whether you're smiling in the photo, right? They can just add that in naturally.
I guess it doesn't matter if you're staying still, though.
This is true. This is why you need action shots. So that would be very true of my son. Yeah. Actually, the best photos, they are typically ones where you're doing an activity or he's really enjoying something. He's immensely sporty. And those ones, they're so full of life, you know, bright eyes, huge smiles, because they've got a kind of whole load of dopamine going on. Life is good. So then you're kind of balancing both there, aren't you?
It's funny, isn't it? Because you're asking them to stop life to then capture this moment of life. It's like, this isn't the moment, guys. This isn't the bit that I was enjoying. Yeah, I totally get it. I remember when Jay was younger, so he would have been maybe 4, 5, maybe 6, and some friends of ours had a wedding. It was some NCT group, and we had a photo of all the NCT kids. There was 6 of us, 2 boys, 4 girls, and it was a wedding, right? So everyone's dressed up, and the girls sat on this wall for this photo, and they looked immaculate. They were demure, they were composed, they looked great, they were looking at the camera. The 2 boys were absolutely feral. They were they were rolling around. At one point, at least one of them started chasing ducks, and just trying to get them all to kind of get into this camera shot, just to take this one photo, so that we could go, look, we've got them when they were babies, and now we've got them, 5-6 years later. Was an absolute nightmare. And it turns out that the two boys in that group both diagnosed neurodivergent.
Really?
Yeah, the signs were there. Now, another of the issues that I have is that my kids don't know what to do with their faces in a photo. Do you have that with yours, or are they pretty?
I think
they know
so.
what the plan is?
Probably less so now that my son's older. Definitely, that would still be the case with my daughter. But I remember when he was probably about 7 or 8, that sort of age, and you tell him to smile, and all of a sudden it was like this Wallace and Gromit kind of. A proper grimace. When they smile naturally, it didn't look like that at all, but suddenly say the word smile or cheese, and what you get is that real bizarre, strange, toothy grin. So yes, this is definitely something.
There's a thing that I think, because my kids can't really be dishonest, right? Certainly with their emotions, they can't really kind of hide their emotions, my kids.
Absolutely.
But when I ask, like, Jay to smile for the camera, it's like, well, he's not having a good time, so he's not going to do that. He's not just going to like turn it on for the camera. I mean, how many times have we had to do that? You do that as an adult, right? You're at a family gathering, and it's like, really? Okay, smile for the camera, you do your grin, you move on, right? But I don't get that from Jay. He finds it very difficult to force a smile or to pretend he's enjoying it. India will always sidestep the issue by pulling a goofy face. That's like, won't smile. I don't think it's necessarily her not being compliant. I don't know, it's just she naturally just falls into dicking about, basically, and being goofy. Otto has this really weird thing going on, right? I don't know where he's learned it from, but he tilts his head to one side and he looks down.
It's got like a little pose going.
Yeah, it's really coquettish. It's very out of place for if you ever met Otto. It sort of really doesn't really fit with his character. It's almost like he's learned to pose from watching photos of Princess Diana. You know that, that sort of look.
Ever so slightly coy and demure.
Yeah, exactly. But every photo that he's ever taken, he's got the same thing. And obviously he is posing for the camera, but it's just really out of context. It's a bit weird.
In his own way. It is funny what you said about the kind of, pulling silly faces, because that's something that we've almost had to introduce to actually get quite a nice photo. Where we do, we're like, right, crazy face, let's do a really silly one, and then we'll get a nice one. And it seems to be now really common that we have to start with the silly ones of the silly faces, tongues out, which are amazing in themselves, to then have what is reasonably natural smiling picture of everybody.
Yes.
But it's the silly faces that bring about that kind of relaxed smile and the laughter. So we use that now. We lean into it.
Yeah, well, you got to do what you got to do, basically. Especially if you're going to print it out and put it on your wall.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
When it's us taking a photo, we've got these sort of tricks, these ways of doing it, and we sort of gather them in and you hold them, keep them from moving off, and you take a photo. Largely, we kind of know what we need to do to be able to get a photo. Where it becomes really difficult is if someone else is taking the photo, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like a large group shot that is being directed by someone who's got no fucking clue about neurodivergent kids, who doesn't know the amount of scaffolding and tricks that need to be put in place to get them on board with taking a photo. Because why would they know? I mean, like, normally it's just like, right, I'm taking a photo, hang around until I'm ready, I'll tell you to pose over there, you move in a little bit there, everyone smile, we'll crack on, right? That's easy, right? In their head, no. Sweet Jesus, no.
Not here.
I remember a photo. It was my mum and dad's 50th wedding anniversary. So again, family photos. And like you say, these are special moments, right? These are going to be preserved forever. Like, it's a huge thing. My parents' 50th wedding anniversary, so they wanted it for posterity. And there's multiple generations of extended family there, and they were like babies and dogs, and it's like there's a lot of going on. There's a lot going on. And I'm already kind of getting a bit stressed because I know that this photo matters. You know, there's all that sort of like this.
You know what's coming.
This is a historical moment. And I know this photo is getting on my parents' wall as well. You know, it's like I know for a fact that's going to be on the wall for a very long time. And you're also thinking, this is probably the last time that all of these people are going to be here, you know, in the same place. So there's a lot riding on this photo. And as they say, we're going to announce a photo. Do you get this when someone goes, right, let's take a group photo? I'm like, oh God. And my heart sinks because I know what's coming. I know that I'm going to have to just try so hard to wrangle everyone. And the amount of faff it took was absolutely unbelievable because the neurotypicals can faff. That's okay. They go and do that. You know, like someone went and changed their outfit or whatever. They can lose focus because they all know they're going to come back and it's going to happen, right?
Take the photo.
I know if my kids have lost focus, we've lost them friggin' 5-10
you're
minutes.
like, guys, we have to do this now. Like,
yeah.
or you can forget it, certainly for a while.
Yeah, exactly. And then when it gets to the point that it's maybe going to trigger a meltdown, you know, particularly with Jay, who's just like hates people wasting time and hates waiting around. If we get to that stage, then, you know, we're going to have to meet back here next year, guys, because
the moment's gone.
This is not happening. I should just thought I should carry a cardboard cutout of Jay. That I can
so you can just put him in.
Just put him in. He doesn't need to be there. No one knows.
No, done. Sorted. That's it. That's the next development then from we were talking about editing photos, the ability to just add somebody in.
Just pop him in there and that would be much easier. So I had to keep Jay focused by talking about his intense special interest, because he will talk to me about that and then he'll be fine. It'll be like we're in this little time vortex where time doesn't matter because he's talking at me about Zelda Breath of the Wild or something like that, right? But I also know that Otto is hugely distractible. So it's not just the fact that he's got the hyperactivity. He is like, his brain is all over the place. If there's a butterfly, he's off. So I'm, I need to rein him back in again and just trying to keep everyone together while everyone else is dicking about, and then get everyone looking in the same direction, smiling for the camera. I genuinely think it remains one of my greatest ever achievements. that photo, I managed to pull that photo off, and I look at that and I go to my parents. I was like, dude,
especially if it's a good one, that is no mean feat.
Exactly.
I mean, that's
and I look at that photo now and I start welling up, and my parents are like, yeah, it was a really emotional day. It's like, you have no idea why I'm welling up. Yes, it was emotional.
I'm welling for a completely different reason to you. But if we're all on the same page now, it's fine. It's funny what you said about posterity, because my daughter, who actually out of the two of them is the one that has protested the most about having photos taken, also absolutely loves photos. Okay. So it's this kind of funny situation where she adores looking back through, because I make photo books, and particularly if we've been on a holiday that she's really loved, I make a little photo book for her, and she loves them. She loves her baby book. She loves, she's quite like me, I guess, in that sense. But now I'm trying to say to her, now that she's a bit older, I can't make these if you don't want to be in the picture, because you're going to look at me or turn back at some point and say, why is all these photos? And no, I'm not in any of them. Or why is there more of him than there is of me? And you're kind of like, this is why. You have to be in the photo if you want that. And she's sort of cottoning onto that now because she understands there is a value to it.
One of the hardest ones for me was looking at school photos. You know, when they send a message, like a letter around going, hey, this week is the week that the kids are going to have their school photos. I was like, oh, no. Like, because there's a whole kind of rigmarole around that at school now. And I'm not there to help steer the process, right?
Yeah.
I can't be there to curate it. So I have no idea what's going to come back, So obviously, just brush their hair in the morning. It's never going to look like that by the time of the photo, particularly with Otto, who's going to have like half a hedge dragged to his hair by the time he actually gets the photo. Yeah. But, you send him off and you go, well, let's hope that this year is the year that we're going to get a nice school photo. Because again, it's not for me. It's not for Tam. I know what they look like. We've got much better photos of them. It's for the grandparents, isn't it? They like a school photo. I don't know why.
They like a school photo. They're the worst photos ever, always, but they have a place somehow.
Yeah, so they go in and they have to sit down, and they're already uncomfortable because they're wearing school uniform typically, and they've probably been queuing up to wait for the photo, which is in itself triggering. And by the time they actually get the photo taken, typically they're not on board with it. So I don't think we'd had a photo where we'd be like, yes, sweet, that's the one. That's going to the grandparents. And we do, but that's the other thing. We do still have to buy it for the grandparents because there's that expectation. So the amount of photos we've got of my kids in their house just looking grumpy.
I mean, that comes back. I can see my son in many of his junior school photos with that Wallace and Gromit smile that I was talking about earlier, you know, where it's so strained. Or my daughter, where she would decide suddenly on the day of a photo that she was going to do something with her hair that she's never done before, ever. And you're like, sure, today of all days.
What a day to try
do that. Why not? Yeah, but you know, when you just think it's just one battle that is not even worth having, that you kind of learn this stuff. And actually, this is probably a blessing in disguise, but because of the age difference between my children, there's 4.5 years, which is 5 school years. There was only ever 1 year where the two of them, because of COVID, where the two of them were at school at the same time for a sibling photo.
Oh, the sibling photo.
Because that's like a whole other level of challenge.
It really is.
So,
how did they cope with that?
Do you know what? It was all right, given all the things that we're discussing, but we only had to do that once.
Okay, yeah, I had it only happened once for me as well, but I've never I still have flashbacks. It was awful. It was so bad because, again, the siblings, so because you've got to queue up, they identify all the siblings who want to take photos, and it's a whole separate photo shoot. So, and I think the parents go in for that. Well, they did with me anyway, or maybe I was just like, I think, like, having Jay and Otto lining up for any period of time is always going to lead to disaster. So I think I might have just gone, you know what, I'm gonna step in for this just to try and smooth it over. And they were squabbling and fidgeting and squirming and just being really aggy with each other.
Yeah.
You're basically waiting in line and watching other people have their photos taken. And that's the other thing. I'm watching other siblings going, oh my God, that's adorable.
Aww,
look at them. You know, they got their arms around each other. They're smiling. They're laughing. It's like, oh, this is, you know, those kids that just go in, just like quick smile to camera, takes it, they're off. They're like, sweet. Eventually gets round to my two and they're arguing and they're bickering. And I'm pretty sure that at the moment that the photo was about to be taken, Jay hit Otto on the head. Right? I missed it, but Otto was like super dysregulated. Jay was, you know, he was also just grumpy about it. So I don't know what had happened. And I was just like, oh no, this is going to be the worst photo ever. I couldn't work it out. And I just knew that it was going to be a bad photo. When it came back, it was actually all right.
It was actually all right.
You know, like, seriously, those school photographers are bloody good at what they do. If you think about how hard it must be to wrangle these kids into
many
position.
children.
But it wasn't too bad. Given what I thought it was going to look like, it wasn't too bad. But since
good.
then...
Maybe that's the key. We just lower our expectations. The other thing I've had to learn
that's the
not
key
to
for
do...
everything with neurodivergent families. Yeah. That's
apply
fine.
it to photos as well. You were saying then about watching all these other children. I've had to learn not to make any sort of outward, not comparisons, that's not true, but there was a time when I thought, oh, maybe this will work, where I go, look at those children, aren't they having a lovely photo taken? Thinking that maybe that might inspire some sort of, we could do that, but no, it had the complete opposite effect.
No, that's misguided, Claire.
So yes, that was risky. It backfired. I quickly had to abandon that plan. Never again.
So yeah, since the sibling photo session, we've only ever had kind of solo photos. No, me and Tam now already know we're not going to buy it. You know, my parents know not to expect that photo this time around. We've given up on that, so that's okay. That does take the pressure off. But I do because you get the WhatsApp groups where they're going, oh, school photo day, make sure they look. It's like, I don't give a shit, mate.
Yeah.
But I do know that at some point I'm going to get a message going, hey, your photo's through, because they still take it and they still send it in the hope that you want to buy it, and it's never one that I ever want to buy, because it's always Otto doing this weird little head tilt, his Princess Diana look, and you know, I've got plenty of them, and I've got, you know, Jay he looks just furious. India has a slightly different thing. She looks really unimpressed. India has the look of a celebrity that has been asked for one too many selfies with a fan.
Just
You know,
had enough.
it's just like,
Had enough.
just like she's been asked to do this
Sure.
hundreds of times. So it's that look that she's gone for, and it works for her. But I do, yeah, when you get that photo through, and it's like, no, not this is not the year. And it's kind of sad. Like, I think with Jay in particular, because Jay is over his time at school is become more and more disillusioned with it, and he's more and more triggered by it, and it's much harder for him. So those photos over time, if you place them side by side, you just see this gradual erosion of his character. It's tragic,
really
genuinely.
sad.
It's really
Yeah.
sad. It's like,
And actually, why do we want to capture that then? Because
Yeah,
you
exactly.
just think, actually, this is killing my kid's spirit. So.
yeah, but I do, like you say, getting those shots of the shots where they're not expecting it, at those moments.
They're
One of my
best
favourite shots of Jay is actually where we were playing an arcade game, and he was Crazy Taxi. Don't know if you know it. It's a great game, and it was like a retro game arcade, and he was playing that, and he was just like so beside himself with laughter. And I got like the camera in, and I just managed to take a photo of us both in the shot.
Well, it's just so natural.
Yeah, and he's just like, that's my boy, that one there, because it's him not being
Yeah, it's
asked
him
to.
in his element. And it's funny because my daughter, in the context of doing something in your element where but still it's a formal, or professional, in inverted commas, photo. Actually, if you take school out of the equation and you put her in the context of, she does a lot of gymnastics and a lot of dancing, and someone's taking photos there, even the kind of less inspired ones, where there's a screen behind them, she's completely different in that, because she is in her element. And then you do get a sense of that personality and her coming alive, because I guess to her it's in the context of something she loves to do versus it being perhaps as forced as a school photo. I'm not sure, but actually we've got some really lovely ones from dance shows and things like that. So yeah, those are really nice. I've almost tried to help have those as an anchor, if that's the right kind of word, to help build their self-esteem or build a sense of joy or accomplishment outside of school, which is just such a significant portion of their life. So any of those great photos, whether it's my son when he's been in the pool, those are the ones we try to really kind of capture and celebrate, and have almost give them copies of it to hold on to build this sense of self. So I think photos can be really powerful, like you were saying with your son playing that game. When you capture them in a moment of real joy and happiness, it almost writes the memory for you in a bizarre way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, exactly, yeah. So we talked about the problem with group photos, and we talked about the problem with school photos. The absolute worst, the pinnacle of this absolute shit show is the school group photo. When they like the whole class photos. Oh my God. Again, that's another one where my heart sinks when the message comes around that they're taking them, because again, I can't be there to stage manage that one. I can't be the only parent going, Otto, look over here, come and smile.
Here.
So, again, you just got to take what is given you at the end of it. And you sort of hope against like, maybe, maybe they're looking at the camera and maybe they're smiling because everyone else is. But it's none of my kids have ever been on board with photos. They're always the one that stands out in it. I don't know if you have that with yours at all.
Do you know, I was just thinking my daughter had her class photo taken last week, and I've got, one of the little things through that you do in their bag, and I haven't looked at it yet. So
really?
I'll come back to you on that one for the most recent one anyway. But even so, I feel the need to buy them, because I remember asking my mum not that long ago if she had any class photos of me at school, and she didn't. She seemed to have lots of my brother though, but none of me. And I'm wondering if maybe it's just because I was that kid. And she just didn't buy it, whereas I'm like, oh no, I'll buy it, because I know that when I asked my mum, I wanted to see it, and there wasn't one. So yeah, but maybe she was just more sensible than me and thought, nope, that is not a picture we need to keep.
Yeah, I mean, so Otto's came through last week, and I did look at it just because I knew. Just because it's funny. I'm not ordering it. I'm definitely not going to order it. But I was curious to see how it was, because Otto has historically actually been pretty good at class photos. It's the Princess Diana thing again, but it's it's consistent.
But that's okay.
It's okay. It's his look. He'll
okay.
go. That's okay. But this year he was right in the middle of the photo, and he was at the front. right? So he was the one sitting down with some other kids on the floor, and he was right at the front. And everyone, it was a beautiful photo. Everyone, because it's a really nice class. All of the kids are really lovely, and they were all smiling, and they were all happy, apart from one kid. Guess which kid, Claire? he looked so fucking sad. It was so heartbreaking, and I don't know what had happened before, because he'd never really had a massive problem. But even in that, at that moment, he couldn't even lean on the Princess Diana.
Well, like you said, they can't hide it. If they're feeling something, then it's right there on their faces to be read, right? So
something had happened. Yeah, definitely something had happened. But this is the thing: is
maybe some pressure. I think there's pressure in that stuff, isn't there, for kids?
Yeah.
You know, that they have to be a particular way, and then that almost makes it much harder for them to do it. So,
but the thing is, all the other parents are going to buy that photo because all of their kids look great. And so I know that those photos are going to be around houses around the country. Their grandparents are going to have it. Parents are going to have it. Everyone's going to look at it and look at the one kid in the front, in the middle, and go, What's wrong with that guy? It's quite funny. I find it quite funny, actually. I'm not like mortified. I think it's quite funny. It's like,
it's quite amusing. Yeah, I think that's it. You have to find the funny side. And someone once said to me about photos that people are only ever looking at themselves. So say as a group of adults, you get a picture taken. People are only ever looking for themselves in it to make sure they look okay. You know, if you're sharing them, let me find the one that I look okay.
Yeah.
And actually, that's probably true of class photos. So, although he is slap bang in the middle, I bet no one's even paying attention because grandparents and parents are all just looking for their own children. So
I'm pretty sure that someone's going to notice the kid in the middle stinking out the vibe.
Oh, poor
and then there was that one. They also did the one where they do the funny faces on it. Because again, it's like, right, this is the one that's smiling. And everyone do stupid faces. And I think, brilliant, this is his wheelhouse, right? He loves doing a silly face. He's all over it. No, he went even more depressed. He put his head on his hands, like proper grumpy face. And that was his silly face. I don't
Probably
know what
because he was
happened.
like, you're taking the joy out of this for me. That's my go-to. And this is not where I want to be doing that. And now you're ruining it even more.
But if you look at that photo out of context and you just like see loads of really kind of happy kids, like crazy kids and stuff, and this one kid in the middle looking kind of a bit depressed, you're thinking, it looks like he's been kidnapped by a cult.
And forced there against his will.
Exactly.
A hostage photo.
He's just looking at the camera, pleading for help. And then the new one we had this year, and you must have had for your boy as well. At the end of primary school, they organise a yearbook. I don't know, did you have that?
Yes, we did. We had the year 6 yearbook when he finished.
How was he with that? Was he on board with that?
Do you know, they actually used their individual school photos in it. So they took the photo because the school, I know this is no avoiding it. Whether you bought it or not, the school have got copies. So they used those as the individual photos from the kids. And then there were a selection of photos that got included from like residentials and things like that.
Okay.
So
my kids are not residential friendly either, so that's not gonna happen.
I mean, because of COVID, he only did one in year 6, and I think it was only 2 nights, or school trips or whatever it is. There were some of those in there, but there wasn't any other photos in it. And actually, I think again, the kind of the sense of having that as a souvenir, if that's the right word, a memento, something to hold on to. When they got it at the end of the year, he absolutely loved it. So I think you look at it through slightly different eyes, don't you? Versus the moment and the stress of the photo when you're being presented by something at a time that you're making this really big transition in your life, then it slightly takes on a different meaning.
Whereas with Jay, it's a very different thing. It's a very different experience. He doesn't want to think fondly of school. He can't think fondly of school because it's an absolute nightmare for him. So and there was this big thing because kids get really excited about it, like you're saying with your kids, and it's a really nice. I'm really happy that there's kids that really enjoy that experience, and they have lots of friends, and they want to get their photos taken with friends, because that's what happened with Jay's school. It's like, go get your mates and we'll take a photo and we'll get like a shot of groups of friends in there.
Okay.
And so he actually, for whatever reason, wanted to take the group photo, the whole year photo. He wanted to do that. I don't know why. And I sort of tried to sort of discourage him a little bit and say, you sure? Because you don't have to. I can get you out of this. I'm pretty good at getting you out of shit I know you're not going to want to do now. But he was like, no, I want to do it. So he went off. And then he came back from school and I was like, how was it? And I already knew. I could tell by his face, you know. And he was like,
face, yeah.
No, I was like, oh, I know how it was. And he just got really pissed off because they all had to wait. They didn't do the whole class photo till the very end. So he's waiting around for everyone to get all their mates to take a photo and stuff. And he's not really got anyone that he wants to take a photo with. So he absolutely hated it. And I haven't seen this photo yet. But part of me is just like, you know what? Not every kid is enjoying this. And I don't mind that being seen.
That is important. And that's his experience of school, right? So and that's his truth. I think it's an important thing. You don't want to kind of gloss over this stuff if that's the experience he's having, because at school is very difficult. Actually, you know, and the same has been true for my son. But I think the fact that they did those group photos is hard too, because I think if you perhaps don't have people you want to do that with, it really forces an issue or almost holds a mirror up, perhaps. I don't know, maybe it triggers all sorts of thoughts and feelings, and they didn't do that with my son's yearbook, and I'm really grateful for that, because it was just you know, it was the individual stuff and then it was the ones that were captured throughout the years, and that was it. Because I think that does add a different pressure for kids, doesn't it? Massively.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, I'll look forward to seeing it. Photos are so important to other people, I think, and parents and grandparents, they're really big. You know, when we go to my parents' house, there are photos everywhere because they love it. It makes them happy. They don't get to see us as much as they'd like, so they like having lots of photos of us. Yeah. So every year I do a calendar for my mum. And it's something that my older brother has always done. He started that off. He's got slightly older kids. So he did that. My parents loved it. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to give it a go as well. I'm going to start this tradition. Why not? Right. And in the early days, it was okay. Like my brother's kids, so their photos are great. Their kids are certainly trending neurotypical. They are looking at the camera, and they're all photos of them on holiday and with an ice cream and looking at the camera and being all fine and lovely, and that's fine. But it's not anything that my kids can get away with, that kind of thing. I don't have those kind of photos. Yeah. So, but I've committed to it now. I've committed to the calendar every year, because if I don't do it, my mum's actually going to be disappointed. So I quickly learned to stop doing those sort of because they have photos with them together, and I can't really do that if I want everyone smiling. So I've changed tack a little bit, and instead of doing that kind of thing, I do what you were talking about, of those little action shots, or just the shots of just them doing something they love. So my photos of my kids up a tree, been like buried neck deep in sand. There's like hanging upside down. My favourite one is all of my kids in a bin. It's such a good photo, and they were so happy because
and I bet they're really happy and they're smiling, so it probably genuinely is an amazing photo. I think those are the best ones, because also that's them, like their personality is shining through and they're happy in that moment. That's how I would want to see it. It's not about, you know, having a kind of posed photo. That I would be the same.
It is getting more and more difficult now, because I do dread the build up to Christmas going, oh God, I've got to get 12 photos. And I've got to kind of spread it out evenly amongst the kids as well. So I've got to, you know, so you're looking back and trying to find ones where they're not looking pissed off and they're looking at the camera, or that it's sufficiently wacky enough to qualify.
Do you know, you said about Christmas there, and it made me think this is the other tradition photo that I accidentally started when my son was a baby and now have to keep going with. But I think it was my son's first Christmas, so he probably was only about 7-8 months old, so he was sitting up, and he just had one of those super cute little elf baby grows on, and I happened to take this photo, and it was just a gorgeous photo. And as you do as a new mum, I made it into a Christmas card to send just to relatives, and then it was just something we kept doing. So for him, as he got older, it always had to be on the move. You know, it was like playing in the garden, out in the woods. And then my daughter came along, and adding her into the dimension. Honestly, taking this photo is one of the most stressful moments of my entire year. You know, and you just think, like, as you said earlier, everyone walks away seething. But thankfully, because of the ability to take a million pictures on your phone, you can usually get one decent one, but it's exactly that. It's this sense of Christmas adds a whole different pressure, and then you start something like your calendar or me doing these Christmas cards, and then you feel like you need to keep going with
You're
it.
locked
So
in,
yes,
even though it's a nightmare for everyone. I mean, the thing is with the calendar in my parents' house is it's normally hidden away. Right? They're in the office or they're in the kitchen. The ones for visitors, because they have people around and they want to show off their kids, right?
Yeah.
So they have the photos of all of their grandkids, and most of the grandkids look amazing. And my lot are, upside down or in a tree. But the thing is that this is where you see the side-by-side comparison of my kids next to my brother's kids. I've got two brothers. So my older brother, who has perfectly smart, very presentable kids who wearing school uniforms, so looking immaculate, prefects as well. It's impeccable. So that's, my other brother, my twin brother, I've got a twin, and his family it's just so glamorous. It's incredible. All of them. They're like from a magazine. And all the kids are so impeccably dressed. And I cannot understand how they could get a 5-year-old in a 3-piece suit and lace up shoes and shit.
Never.
But they do, and they look incredible. And and they're on the wall next to my kids. They got spaghetti in their hair.
Well, I was about to say, if it makes you feel better, my kids would have ketchup down their t-shirt, hair that hadn't been brushed in about 3 days.
I know, but it's my lot are so far removed from the other photos that it's quite jarring, and I often wonder what visitors to my parents' house think. Of when they see them.
Do you know, I've never really thought about that before, but I've got a brother who doesn't have children yet. He may do one day, but at the moment that's kind of bought me a bit of time to get through this, because I'm sure that'll be the case for him. He'll probably have these beautiful, impeccable children who sit nicely for photos. So yeah, I've kind of bought myself unknowingly a little bit of time there for lack of comparison.
Yeah, I do find it quite funny. Maybe that's just my dark humour now, because I think being a parent of a neurodifferent kid, you develop just a dark humour about things you can't change. I can't change the fact that my kids are not going to be that presentable. So in a way, I'm quite amused by the fact that they're loud and proud in their own presentation of life.
That's why I think these things are so great, just having these conversations, because I think there's so much joy and in comfort in listening to people share stories where you go, oh my God, I have a version of that. Yes, I can absolutely relate, because you have to find humour in this stuff. It might not be funny to someone else, but it would be to us, because we can see it. Even if we don't know the children, we can imagine it. We know what that's like.
Yeah, absolutely. We've all got our own different trials when it comes to this. Another of the frustrations I get, and I don't know if you do, I think again it's an ADHD thing, but we tried doing Skype calls. Have you ever tried doing Skype calls? Are your kids okay on Skype calls?
I mean, FaceTime would be the version I would do, but oh no, they'll say hi and then that's it, because again, it requires sitting still and it's just so boring. When my daughter was younger, she might have hijacked the phone, and taken it, but no one could see her because she wasn't holding it up, she was just lost in whatever it was she was doing. But yes, they're not successful.
It was an absolute nightmare with my kids trying to get them to focus, because again, it's like my parents want to see them, so we'd have a Sunday Skype call. We tried to get this tradition going that we'd have a little Skype call on a Sunday. My kids were just all over. They were never in shot. They were off, they go hello, if that, and then they'd be off. And my parents they've seen me, they're bored of me. It's not me they're phoning for, let's face it.
I know, that's it. You don't want to see me, do you? But my kids are completely the same. It's so boring. It's you're expecting me to sit still and talk to somebody and remotely
have a conversation.
As well. I think there's something about the screen that really doesn't engage the brain. Because even I noticed this myself, I've over, say, COVID, when virtual calls and video calls were introduced, I find it really hard to stay focused and concentrate in a way that I wouldn't if I was having that meeting conversation with somebody face to face. It's fine like this when it's one-on-one, but if you were in a group situation. So for children who are born to move, I don't think it's anything worse. We just don't even attempt it. We just say hi. Just say hi. My kids are completely
born to move sounds like a t-shirt slogan.
Yes. We should get
My
that.
kids are born to
New
me,
slogan.
certainly. And they would get really distracted by pictures of themselves as well. Because you've got
on
the little
screen
shot
to
in the
start.
corner. So they were like, I don't give a shit about my parents who I haven't seen in ages. It's like there's a picture of themselves on the screen. You know what you look like already. We've established this. But they can't, they get too distracted. And it was just so frustrating of me trying to wrangle them into this situation where they could provide some sort of value to my parents who'd phoned up to speak to them, that in the end I just just gave up. We didn't bother in the end. It's just not a
Do you know, we use
thing.
voice notes now for that exact reason, because actually it's easier if you want to quickly record a message. You can hear their voice, but it's short enough and sweet enough that it doesn't require them to stop moving for too long. It doesn't take away. You can hear their voice, but just with none of the challenges of a video call.
It's not all rubbish.
Okay, so obviously we need to look at the positives for all of this. It's not all frustration.
Absolutely.
And we've touched on quite a few of them. It is, it's been quite uplifting to talk to you in the way that you
it's massively uplifting. I genuinely find it funny. It's good.
And if you can take that out of it, then you're going to be okay. I mean, the biggest positive for me really is that our depiction of life on camera is not false, right?
No.
It's not stage managed. It's not to be put on social media and sort of give this false depiction of how your life is. It is sometimes all too real, but it is absolutely real, warts and all. And like I genuinely love that about my family, that if they are smiling on camera, they really mean it.
Yeah, they're smiling, because you can't fake that. That's the one thing. If they're not, like you said, they wear their emotions on their face.
And again, something that you sort of touched on earlier, photos of my kids are not about the photo itself. It's about the moment, right? So my kids are never going to be stood in front of the Taj Mahal. Right? Here's a photo of the Taj Mahal that we got someone to take a photo of. It's not about that. So our photos, there is a story behind every single photo. If you show me a photo of me and my kids, I will tell you at that moment in time what Jay was doing, why Otto had one wet croc, why India is really grumpy. It's because she's cold and I'm holding her coat, which you can see in the photo. There's a story behind everything.
The trauma. The trauma of the photo.
Exactly.
It brings it to life, doesn't it, in a different way.
It's like art, isn't it? It's like, when you look at those beautiful old paintings, like The Last Supper, and you look at it, there's so much going on in this photo, isn't there? Look, and what is this person thinking, and what's the relationship of this person with this person? Like, you can dissect our family photos to an nth degree. We should pass them on to an art historian and let them sort it out.
You tell the story. This is a pictorial version. You add the words.
That's definitely a thing that I like about our family photos, that they mean something, certainly to me anyway. The story behind it is really the thing that I love.
I couldn't agree with you more. That's it. They are. I think that's why I treasure them, because it's my family, right? These are my kids, and they're amazing, and this is our life, and I love the fact that we capture it in the way that we do, because it's meaningful. And sometimes you look back on these photos, particularly ones you haven't seen for a long time. Sometimes you get served them, don't you, on your phone, like on this day.
Oh, yeah,
and it's funny. It's so funny. Like, I got served one the other day where I was saying this earlier about my daughter, and she was so grumpy in this photo. Everybody's smiling. I think it was probably like the first time we'd all got together as a family after COVID or something like that. But she did not want to be in this photo, and it's funny, like it would be tempting to just delete the picture, but you're like, no, it's amusing because that's the story, isn't it? That was part of it. You don't want to erase it.
I love that idea. Maybe I should do a calendar for like all my kids just looking pissed off every month. It's just like a different child looking really pissed off about something that I have no control over. Just to remember
write the story instead.
That'd be beautiful.
We're quite fortunate, aren't we, with the phones that we've got and the phenomenal cameras that are on them, that we always have this ability to capture them. And like you said earlier, it's not for social media at all. It's just because it's your children, it's your family, and it's your story, and you want to keep it.
I think technology is a wonderful thing, and that we can take thousands and thousands of photos, and they can be in our hand all the time. Whereas back in the old days, when can you imagine our kids in the old days where you had to stand there for 7 hours to get a photo photo. There was a time in that, where it was the camera took ages to expose. They'd have to sit down to have their photos taken. Can you imagine that now? They would just be complete blur, wouldn't it?
I couldn't imagine that at all. Although I do wonder, in the way that ADHD is if something is novel or you're interested in it, you can have that hyperfocus. So there's the possibility that maybe the first time they would stand still because they'd be like, "Oh, this is new. What's this? What's going on here?" You might get
that
wrong.
long though.
No, not for that long. But then that would be it. This is why I still print my photos, and probably why I'm a bit old school in that sense, because it's easy to take thousands. I mean, God, there's a scary amount of photos on my phone.
I should definitely delete loads of photos in my phone. I think there are too many. Whereas in the old days, our parents would take a handful of photos a year. And now I go to visit my parents and they'll get the photo albums out. They'll occasionally be like, "Oh, that's nice." You imagine going through our photo albums with our kids.
Yeah,
in
like,
the future.
God,
It's like,
thousands.
all right, we've got 14 million photos to get through, kids. Strap in.
Neurodiversity champions.
Right, the next section in the It's Not All Rubbish bit of the show is the Neurodiversity Champions. So this is a shout out to any organisation or a human doing great things in advocating for neurodiversity. So Claire, do you have anyone that you want to kind of bring forward as a neurodiversity champion?
Oh, that's such a big question, isn't it? Because I feel like just the sheer privilege of getting to do what I do with All Aboard ADHD, my podcast, and actually my coaching is talking to so many amazing people who are doing things in all sorts of different contexts, whether that's academics who are kind of leading the way with the field, or it's foundations that are set up to try to actually change things for kids in terms of their educational experiences and their outcomes that way. I meet people who are developing pieces of technology. There's a great app that I've just come across from a mum of neurodiverse kids, as all these things are, right? If you need something, and she's developed this app called Zen Life.
Okay.
And I think this is really, really clever. I genuinely do, whereby you as a parent, wherever you are on that journey, so whether it's pre-diagnosis and you're just in a situation where you're almost trying to compile the evidence, when you're first going to see somebody, or you are kind of post-diagnosis and you are putting together stuff for school interventions or for EHCPs and whatever. Basically, you can record little voice notes into this app, and a bit like a diary entry. So you say what's happened with your kid in that day, and you do not need to use any technical language. You can say it as it is. You can say they're having a meltdown and exactly why. And what it does through the use of AI, and I think this is where it's really clever, it then transcribes what you're saying and it collates all those diary entries, for want of a better word, and it produces a report in formal language that you can then use that's context specific.
That's amazing. Using AI.
It is, honestly, it's amazing.
Such a great use of AI.
I can then select this and go, right, well, it's for diagnostic purposes, and it will, for want of a better word, translate what I'm saying into the language that's necessary when you're going to see
that's
your
going to get their
GP
attention.
or a consultant, whoever's going to do that diagnosis, or you're in the process of doing an EHCP. And I just think that the value in this is huge. And this is not a big kind of tech startup. This is a mum who's developed an app, and a bit like what we're doing with our podcast. Everything is organic because you're managing and trying to promote this stuff yourself. But she just wanted to give people the tools when they're going through these various stages, because I think as a parent, you don't know what you're doing so much of the time, and you're trying to, let's say you're going through the process of diagnosis and you're just trying to remember all these different examples, and sometimes it's hard. It can feel really overwhelming, and it's not because there's a lack of evidence, because you're dealing with this stuff day in, day out, but the fact that you just need to do a 30-second voice note and it does the work for you, I think is genuinely genius. And this is not a plug in the sense of any kind of promotional sense. This is truly an app that I have come across, and I really think could make a massive difference.
Well, I'll check that out. I'll put that in the show notes so that people can check it out.
I think that's an amazing one. And also, not just businesses, right? There's so many amazing people that I meet every day. So, I could just go on and on forever, but I think the only other person I want to say is that right back in the beginning, when my son was going through that process, I felt so alone. Like, this just stuff that we have now just didn't exist at all. And I just couldn't see anybody locally who understood. And I read an article one day written by someone called Kate Pearce, and it was the first time ever that I thought, oh my God, that's it. That's my son, what you're describing there. That's it. Yeah. It was, I hope what people get from listening to our podcast. And it resonated so deeply with me that I sent this message to who was a complete stranger over Instagram and said, I've just read your article, and I just wanted to reach out and say how amazing it is, because I just never thought I'd meet someone who understood. And to this day, I've never met Kate in person. We've tried, and just in that way that our paths have never crossed. But she is so worthy of mention, because she was the very first person on my journey. And people say you've got to find your people, don't you? You need to find your community. That's how you get through this. And she, just in a virtual sense, she was that. And in many ways you could argue she's contributed to me doing All Aboard, to us having this conversation now, because I just never wanted people to feel as alone as I did. So she
got back to you when you emailed her initially. She was like,
she was just really, and just nice. It just responsive, a bit like, if someone sends you a message about the podcast. It's just so amazing to feel like these conversations are helping somebody in whatever way it resonates to them. And she was that first person for me, and actually at a time when I really, really, really needed just somebody to understand. It was, and it was so removed, I just felt like seen in that moment.
And it is really important that having that moment where you're having your experience with your kid, and it's very different from everyone else's, and you're like, I'm the only one going through this shit. So finding that that description of your child, it's like, yes, that's what's going on. That's such a light bulb moment, isn't it?
Tiny epic wins.
All right, we'll do the tiny epic wins now. So this is the things that in a neurotypical family would not really even be worthy of comment. There's just an everyday thing for them. But in our worlds, it's an epic win. It's a major victory. Do you have many of those tiny epic wins in your world, Claire?
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, this is going to sound really obscure, but this morning I was walking out the door to take my daughter to school, and she reached back to hold my hand. And that is massive, because even though she's only 8, there was a period of time where I think she was struggling a lot to regulate in different ways, and almost, although she really needed that connection, she almost rejected it. I don't really know how to explain what was going on, but my son was very different when he was that age. Same dysregulation, but he needed you. So he'd be explosive, but he'd want you there. Whereas she'll be explosive, but she would reject me, even though she needs it. And it was so difficult to navigate, because then she would throw back at me, well, you don't do this and you don't do that. And you're like, I try. But what I've seen recently is just moments of her really softening, and I can't tell you how much joy those tiny little things come from me. Or like when I cuddle her and she doesn't want me to let her go, because there was a time, at bedtime's really difficult for us, where there would be another issue as a delay mechanism. So when she then creates this lovely moment and she wants that cuddle and she wants to be held, and I know it's so obscure, and to anybody
but it's
listening,
really important. It's
might
those
think,
little,
what? She held your hand? I'm like, oh no, I can't tell you how long. And if that's the one that jumps to mind straight away. But I just think there's something very special about stepping back and going, actually, we've come very far.
Yeah, there's real merit in that. Yeah, definitely in doing that. I've got a tiny epic win, which is so tiny. So tiny, it's genuinely hilarious. It was Father's Day recently, which I don't often expect great things from Father's Day.
That's like me with Mother's Day.
So I had my Father's Day card. This isn't the tiny epic win, but just to kind of frame it, my Father's Day card Jay had obviously been made to do a Father's Day card for me, which, for a PDA, there needs to be some equalising behaviour. And that was in the middle of the card. So he'd drawn some pictures of some sort of video games that we share an interest in. So there was that on the front. And then inside, he'd just written in tiny letters, "I hate this."
Yeah, absolutely. That action.
Like,
gonna make it very clear. I've done it, but under duress.
Yeah. Now that's not the tiny epic win. What the tiny epic win was what happened later, when we were all kind of sitting around, and then Tam went around the table and went, "Can you say a nice thing about Daddy, just so that he knows you appreciate him?" Which is like, you're setting this up for disaster. And it got round to Jay, and he went, "He's not as bad as he could be." And I was like, "Dude, I'll take that all the way."
I'll take that.
Fine. Phew, I got off lightly there. That's basically how it felt. That was a tiny epic win for me.
What the flip?
Okay, so the final bit of this is the what the flip moments. This is basically my reason for getting all the stuff that Jay says to me into some sort of format. And these are basically moments, anything that your kids have said or done that have completely thrown you, where as a parent you were like, I have no words to respond to this. Do you have many what the flip moments with your two?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, too many to even recall, I think. There are moments where you have what the flip in the sense of what is going on here, and you are completely speechless. And there is also, I don't know if this is thinking about it in the right context, there's moments when they say things and they're just so right in what they're saying. You just have to go, yeah, you're absolutely right there. And that's what I meant. They kind of get to the heart of things. They get to the core of things.
Like laser guided accuracy to
stop you in your tracks. But it's important, or I'm trying to get better at almost stopping and going, do you know what, you are absolutely right, and taking that, because you're on the back foot slightly, whereas I'm trying to take the approach now of, yes, yeah, thank you.
It's
you're
important.
Right.
I think that's really important kind of, to do, is to go, sometimes you're right and I'm
wrong.
It
is. And in the context of a photo, there was one example the other day where my daughter had a picture from a dance show and I was putting it up on the wall for her. And I was using a spirit level and she was like, "It doesn't always have to be perfect, Mummy." And I was like, "Ooh, okay." And I am definitely guilty of perfectionism. Not because in any way I think I'm perfect, but in that very ADHD way where I'm just trying so hard all the time to eliminate ways in which someone could criticise me, or just another way that I don't get something right. But to her, that comes across as me just trying to, I guess, if you think in a demand avoidance way as well, control, that's probably how she sees it. And I had in that moment just to go, do you know what? You are absolutely right. This is your bedroom. You tell me how you want it hung and I will just do it. And I put the spirit level down. That was so hard. Like inside, I'm like,
nice. I've got a couple. One is that Jay came back from school and he was furious. The reason he was furious was that they wouldn't let him play in the band for the school play. They're doing a school play, right? I'm a bit nervous about his involvement in it. He was furious because they wouldn't let him in the band. And I said, why? What happened? He went, "Mrs. Murphy said we don't need an ocarina in the band for the school play."
What's an ocarina?
An ocarina is a typically made of clay. It's kind of like a round pipe sort of thing. It basically does not fit in any way in Oliver Twist. Which is set in Victorian England. And I'm fairly sure they didn't have South American woodwind instruments in Oliver Twist. And not only that, right? Not only does an ocarina not belong in Dickensian England, he can't play the ocarina. It's not like he's got this skill he's burning to share with the world. He can't do it. He's just really insisted that he needed to get it out there. Oh,
that's amazing. That's so good. It could have been worse. You could have said yes, yeah.
That would be 100% better. Seriously, that would have been amazing. So that was one of the what the flip moments. The other one, I'm still trying to work out. He said with enormous amount of authority, he said, women's pockets are 34% smaller than men's because in Victorian times there was a spate of them carrying firearms and shooting people in power.
Like,
boom, just dropped that on me and fucked off. And I was just like,
I'm speechless. Like,
I don't know what to do with this.
Yes.
It's like, how do you, where's the evidence? 34%? That's very specific. And also, no, I don't think, is that a thing?
I know, and then you're like, is it? That's fascinating. Or have you just made that up? I don't know.
Don't get drawn in. Don't get drawn into it. It's absolute bullshit. I don't know where he's taking it from. It's not. No, but he speaks with such authority.
Yeah. You're like, I kind of love that. That's
a spate of women shooting people in power.
I know, even the language he's using to describe it is amazing. So either someone said that to him, or as you say, he's just come up with this in his imagination, which is also amazing. But you know that he will have said that to some other child who is now quoting him like verbatim on 100%. This historical fact that we all now need to Google.
And this is the thing with it. Sometimes he'll say something that you just like, well, that's absolute nonsense. And sometimes I will Google it and it will be right. This is not one of those times, just to be clear. I think what's happened here is he's overheard something, not really been fully paying attention, taken that and just gone, I've got the gist. I'll make up the rest. It's probably going to be right.
Yeah.
And then I will just now...
I'll just add some colour to that.
And then I'll let the world know the 100% fact and they can take it forwards. And so we are. So everyone else knows now. Okay, so that is the end of this particular episode of Neuroshambles. Firstly, thank you so much, Claire, for coming on and talking to me about your neuroshambolic family and the joy of taking photos with them.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Before you go, tell us a little bit more about All Aboard ADHD, which is your podcast. Where can we get it? What's it about?
Thank you. Yes, it's a bit weird being on the other side of it. Normally it's me doing your jobs. This is different for me. But it's called All Aboard ADHD. It's available on all the usual platforms, Spotify, Apple, Google, though I think that's now going.
Don't trust Google, guys. Go YouTube instead if you're that way.
YouTube podcast, exactly. So it's available on all platforms, and it's a fortnightly podcast, so episodes go out every 2 weeks on a Friday, and they alternate between experts in the field sharing kind of key credible information and insights for wherever you are on your journey, starting with the basics of what is ADHD and just going into many different areas from then. And also it alternates between that and parent episodes where I have a set of questions and I ask different parents of children with ADHD those same questions, and they share their stories, a bit like we're doing today, just to help parents feel less alone. As I said earlier, just never wanted someone to feel the way that I did in those early days. And ultimately, All Aboard ADHD is about helping parents navigate the ADHD journey.
Yeah, great. And it's a great listen. So,
thank you.
So everyone check that out.
Thank you very much.
No worries at all. Now, as I mentioned in the previous episode, this is the final show in the current season of Neuroshambles. So for my own sanity... I'm taking a little bit of a break over the summer. Now, well
deserved.
I'm definitely not going to be sitting back and relaxing. Don't think I'm just going to, I'm off duty, guys. I'm not relaxing. I can't relax in my own house anyway. But not only that, but I'm going to be focusing on planning the next season and really kind of booking some wicked guests. And I'll get some old favourites back and I'll be booking some exciting new ones. I'm also, heads up, I'm going to be recording a special episode with Tam, who has agreed to come on to one of the episodes and talk. I think we're going to be talking about the different diagnosis pathways of our 3 kids, because they've all been very, very different. And so we've got quite a lot to say about that. So that should be one to look forward to. For those of you who requested it, next season, we're also going to be having the ones that are focusing on school. So, I initially thought I'll do one about school, but it's way too big. I'm going to have to split it into lots of different bits.
Drill it down.
Yeah, so there's going to be some school ones in the next season as well. So hopefully, guys, there's a lot to look forward to when we're back, which is going to be Wednesday, the 4th of September, 2024. That is when season 2 will start. So look out for that. Until then, just wanted to say a massive thank you to all the magnificent guests that I've had on in season 1 who've embraced Neuroshambles and changed it from being one man alone in a room just having a moan to something that is what it is now. It's lovely and it's really honest and it's enlightening, listening to other people's perspectives, but most importantly, it's fun. I really enjoy it and I hope other people do as well. Final thank you is to the listeners for joining me and for sticking with us. Thank you especially to anyone who's sent any lovely emails in or given me reviews or feedback. And if you've got any suggestions for topics that you want me to cover in season 2, please send that in. You can send it to hello@neuroshambles.com and I will definitely consider it when I'm kind of putting together the series for next season. Right, I got all that out of the way. Thanks for bearing with me on that one. In the meantime, hope everyone manages to stay relatively sane in the forthcoming summer holidays. Good luck, guys. And hopefully I'll see you the other side. All that remains for me to say now is have a nice life.